Hey YouTube, this is Ozark's brother Jerry, and our parsha this week is Bereshit. We're starting all over, and it's Genesis 1:1 through 6:8. And it's an overview. We have chapter 1's creation. We have the Garden of Eden, and Adam and Eve get moved there. Chapter 2. In chapter 3, we have the fall of man. Chapter 4, we have the first death of a human. Some people call it a murder, but a murder is you have malice in your heart. And as I understand it, no one had even witnessed the death of a human, so I'm not so sure. I don't know. He may have had malice in his heart. And chapter 6, 1 through 8, we have evil run amok, and we have the giants. But kind of a puzzle to me, and I just kind of blew over it, is the light and darkness created in Genesis 1, verses 3 through 5. Because how could we have light and darkness when the sun and moon aren't created until verse 16? So I wanted to spend a little time on that. If you search the commentaries, it's just people are all over the place on that. So I think maybe my opinion is is as good as anybody's, or certainly no crazier. Put it that way. But so first of all, I'll read that Genesis. Well, let me read. Let me start from Genesis 1. Genesis 1:1 as a backdrop, the first two verses. In the beginning, Elohim created heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the spirit of Elohim moved upon the face of the waters. And Elohim said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And Elohim saw the light, that it was good. And Elohim divided the light from the darkness, and Elohim called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. So, as a backdrop, which maybe help us interpret the following verses. In verse 1, in the beginning, Elohim created the heaven and the earth. Well, how was the earth created? Well, it was created to be inhabited. We know that from Isaiah 45:18. For thus saith Yahweh that created the heavens, Elohim himself that formed the earth and made it, he hath established it. He created it not in vain. He formed it to be inhabited. I am Yahweh and there is none. So, this may be controversial, and that's okay. But I believe that the earth was when it was first created, it was inhabited. Now in verse 2, and the earth was without form. If you look up was in your concordance, that means it was a process. So it was without form. It became without form. Originally it had form. And maybe to shed a little bit of light on that is Jeremiah 4:23 through 26. I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void, and the heavens, and they had no light. I beheld the mountains, and lo, they trembled, all the hills moved lightly. I beheld, and lo, there was no man, and all the birds of the heavens were fled. I beheld, and lo, the fruitful place was a wilderness, and all the cities thereof were broken down at the presence of Yahweh, and by his fierce anger. So, if that was prior to verse 2 of Genesis 1, something happened. So, to aid me in understanding this, I recently purchased this book, okay? And whenever I read a chapter, I look to see if there are any idioms, any Hebrew idioms in there. And the idiom is like, if you said, well, Sam really got himself into a pickle. And then someone wrote that down, and 3,000 years later they're reading that, and it says Sam was in a pickle. Well, what kind of pickle? Was it a dill or was it a sweet? So, well, we know it wasn't really a pickle, it was an idiom. It was a way that we, maybe like a colloquialism, which is, to a certain geographic area, people understood what they were talking about. And for instance, another idiom is like the Ten Commandments. Doggies. They were written by the finger of Elohim. Well, that's an idiom that means that there's something paranormal by the Father. It doesn't mean he used his finger. However, he could have used his finger. I'm not limiting the Most High. But anyhow, there are three idioms here, and the first is verse 3. And Elohim said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Well, according to this book, and I'm still open. My dogs just love each other. They're down there groaning and moaning. And Elohim said, "Let there be light." Well, according to my idiom book, it is let there be enlightenment and let there be understanding. I'm going to let you look at this, and then you can freeze it, and if you care to, you can. Let me get this here. So you can freeze your screen, and you can write that down. And what I did was I struck out the original scripture, and I put in what the idiom says it is. So I'm not changing my Bible or anything. I just, for my own understanding, I wrote that down. So if this guy is correct, and Elohim said, "Let there be enlightenment and let there be understanding," and there was light. Well, if you look up understanding, and I always use Webster's 1828, which is the closest to when the English was converted to when the Bible was printed. Understanding means comprehending ideas which Yahweh expresses and intends to communicate, to judge between good and evil. And to enlighten means to illuminate divine knowledge of the truth to see clearly. So let's go on to verse 4. And Elohim, the original verse is, and Elohim saw the light, that it was good, and Elohim divided the light from the darkness. Okay, Elohim divided the light from the darkness. And the darkness, instead of darkness, you would put ignorance and lack of enlightenment and understanding. So, in ignorance, the definition of that would be a destitution of knowledge, and or not to acknowledge. So, and don't think that the Father is not in the business of creating ignorance, or maybe even evil. Because with evil in the world, we have the capacity to choose between him and Satan. So maybe he wants the people that will choose him. He could have just created droids had he wanted to, who would follow his every command. Yahweh can do anything. But Isaiah 45:7 says, "I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, Yahweh, do all these things." So it says that, right in Scripture. So back in verse 4 or verse 3, following our idiom understanding, and Elohim said, "Let there be enlightenment, let there be understanding." So I don't understand how there can only be one God and God wasn't created, but I don't let that bother me. Just some things I think are beyond, finite understanding. And could it be that understanding was created and there's a finite capacity of it, or it's a zero-sum commodity? I don't know, but I don't discount that. Matthew 13:10-2, and they were Yeshua was talking to the apostles about the parables. So anyhow, Matthew 13:10-12, and the disciples came and said unto him, Why speakest thou unto them in parables? He answered and said unto them, Because it is given unto you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given. For whosoever hath, to him shall be given, and he shall have more abundance. But whosoever hath not, from him shall be taken away even that he hath. So there are people pre-chosen to understand things, and there are people pre-chosen not to understand things. And I pray that he doesn't take understanding away from me and give it to someone else. In another area, another scripture that refers to probably the same incident is in Mark 4:21-25. And he said unto them, Is a candle brought to be put under a bushel or under a bed, and not to be set on a candlestick? For there is nothing hid which shall not be manifested. Neither was anything kept secret, but that it should come abroad. If any man have ears to hear, let him hear. And he said unto them, Take heed what ye hear, with what measure ye mete, it shall be measured to you. And unto you that hear shall more be given. For he that hath, to him shall be given, and he that hath not, from him shall be taken even that which he hath. So I think we should appreciate any understanding the Father has given us, and we should pray for more. In verse 24, and he said unto them, Take heed what ye hear, with what measure ye mete, it shall be measured to you. So we should value his understanding. Or when he created darkness, believe in that. Is he just setting up a metaphor, for us? Matthew 4:16. The people which sat in darkness saw great light. Unto them which sat in a region and shadow of death, light is sprung up. Romans 13:12. The night is far spent, the day at his hand. Let us therefore cast off the works of darkness, and let us put on the armor of light. So when we're reading Bereshit, in this parsha, think about that really hard. What is being talked about in verses 3-5. So I look forward to next week's parsha. See you later.